Hello and welcome to another Green Thumb program. My name is John Schaefer and I am with the Harris County Public Library. We produce the Green Thumb program show in conjunction with the Harris County Master Gardeners, but our show is available for anyone who finds us. That's right, everyone is welcome, and especially if you're from Texas and the Houston area. And a great place to also find us is on the Harris County Public Library website at hcpl.net. Now, we also have a companion blog to this program written by HCPL's own and also Harris County Master Gardener Steve Bearfield. And there's going to, when you go see his blog, you'll see links to the show. So definitely you want to check out the website at hcpl.net. We are so glad to have you here. Today is the third Tuesday of every month at 11 a.m. That's when our show is every month. And today's topic is powerful perennials. Plant once and enjoy for years. Garden stalwarts provide beauty, pollinator value, and of course are easy to care for. But before I introduce our presenter, I want to tell you a couple of things. One, we love questions. So please, you want to type those questions into the chat section of Facebook or YouTube or wherever you're viewing us. And we have master gardeners who are monitoring the chat, and they will be answering your questions. And of course, we're also going to talk to our presenter a couple times throughout the program. And second of all, our next show, our last show of 2025, will be on Tuesday, October 21st, and that will all be on composting. Big topic, very popular. You're going to want to make sure you write that on your calendars right now. You don't want to miss it. Composting. Why buy compost when you have everything at home to make your own, and it's easier than you think? Now, I am very excited to introduce your presenter, Valerie Depew. She's been gardening for decades and considers her father to have been her most influential garden mentor. She went to the University of Texas Health Science Center, where she earned a master's in biomedical communications before entering the pharmaceutical field. And after retiring from a 25-year career in the industry, she's been active in the Harris County Master Gardeners, and her own garden is a blend of large livestock water troughs for vegetables and herbs, pollinator and native flower beds, and a sprinkling of old Southern heirlooms. So please welcome Valerie. How are you doing, Valerie?
Hey, very well, John.
Always good to see you. Always good to see you. And I guess my first question: perennials, not annuals. Kind of a dumb question, I guess. Maybe.
Not a dumb question at all. And if you will be patient, in a few minutes, you'll find out the difference.
Well, patience is not my strong suit, so let's go ahead and get to it. I know everybody is looking forward to this. We, of course, will be stopping throughout the program, stopping at a couple times during questions. So please keep those coming in the chat section. But with that, Valerie, I'm going to let you get to it.
Well, thank you so much. And thank you to all the good folks at the Harris County Public Library system that make these broadcasts a possibility, because we're always so honored to have the opportunity to bring some of this research-based gardening information to the public. That's our mission, and that's what we all love to do. So having said that, we'll jump into Powerful Perennials. You've already heard that there is one more program in this series on composting. And so that's just around the corner. The topics that we'll discuss today are, as John mentioned, the definition of a perennial. What is a perennial? And then what are the benefits of planting these particular types of plants? How do you choose just the right place for your perennials? We're going to discuss some specific plants, all of which I actually do have growing in my garden or have experience with. And then I'll provide you with some resources about perennial gardening. And of course, we'll have Q&A. That's the fun part. So by definition, a perennial is a plant that lives for more than 2 years. Some are short-lived perennials, so their window is more like 2 to 5 years. Others can go on and on, not ad infinitum, but they can go on for quite some time. And a perennial may die back completely in the winter, all the way to the ground, and then regrow in the spring. A woody herbaceous perennial may just lose its leaves in the winter and then sprout out again. So there's some variability in that, and those are all things to consider when you choose plants for your particular garden. So there's so much to talk about with this category, and choosing plants, believe me, that was a bit of a challenge, but it was a lot of fun. An annual is a plant that is literally replaced seasonally. It has a one season lifespan for the most part. There are exceptions. We do have in our area some annuals that almost perennialize because our climate is relatively mild. But in general, we talk about annuals as the plants that are the seasonal color. There are warm season spring annuals, there are hot season annuals, and now we're gradually coming into our cooler season annuals. Those are when all the bedding plants get swapped out for plants that more tolerate cooler weather. There are also biennials, things like foxglove is a good example. A biennial lives for 2 seasons, and it will typically be planted one year, grow a lot of vegetative growth and a good root system, and then it will bloom the following year, typically. The benefits of perennials. Why on earth are we even talking about them? There are so many ways to look at perennial gardening, but in the Gulf Coast, one of our advantages is that you literally do not have to replace perennials as often as you would annual bedding plants. That can be quite costly and expensive and labor intensive to replace the entire look of your front yard with seasonal bedding. It's great to add those pops of color, but for an actual base, it can be a challenge. Perennials typically have long bloom seasons. Again, not all. Some are going to bloom in a specific window, and we'll talk about some of those. But to me, one of the most valuable benefits is the pollinator resource that they provide. They provide rich nectar for all of our pollinators, and indeed, many of them are host plants. Some of our native perennials are host plants for some butterfly species, moth species, etc. And that's certainly something that we want to encourage in our gardens. Another advantage is that perennials often require little maintenance. I don't want to say no maintenance, and some can be a little more demanding than others, but in general, the idea of a perennial is to plant it once, low maintenance, and it will give you blooms for several, if not many seasons. Because of their hardiness, it's like you can rely on them. You know that there's going to be a consistent look to your landscape. So you can, by planting perennials, plan the look of your garden in terms of these that bloom very intensively in the spring are going to have a different color pattern, different textures. But as the summer season comes into play, then that look of your garden is going to change because those really strong, robust, hot weather perennials will kind of come into bloom, and that look will change. And now my garden in the back is evolving into the fall and cooler season garden. The warm tones kind of pop out. There are a lot of plants that have some oranges and yellows, and those are making their presence known. And also the butterflies are really happy about that too. So you can plan your bloom times to have color virtually all year round. So I love to talk about this. This is not a propagation talk, but perennials have another advantage in that they can be easily propagated by either sharing their seeds, making cuttings, or dividing them. Many perennials can literally be divided into 1, 2, 3, sometimes more plants. When they're dormant, that's the time to divide. And again, I mentioned, you plant them once, that sort of thing. Well, that reduces your yearly planting cost because they come back each year in some form, either from that cutting that you nourished and you plant it back out, or also from seeds that they scatter. So you can have a few perennials and many perennials by propagation. And also, I should mention, the heat tolerant perennials make it much easier to get through the summer. I don't know about you, but I'm not eager to get out when it's extremely hot. When the global the wet bulb global temperature is 110. I'm not interested. So nor is it safe. But those plants are out there and they're making it through our blistering summers, and they really help to reduce the workload. So that's another great benefit. If you're interested in propagation, there are, I believe in the actual, in the library archive, there are some plant propagation videos. This one is also Dr. Jean Pfeffer. It's available on YouTube. And Dr. Pfeffer is a very long time master gardener, now retired. So she is a master gardener emeritus, soon to be, I believe. And we also have horticulture resources on propagation. So these will explain the many methods that are available to propagate your own perennials. As I said, whether it's through collecting the seeds and propagating those, or making cuttings, or division, or layering. And there's so much information. Plant propagation is a great fun hobby. I really enjoy it, and I'm learning more about it all the time. But then again, that's what being a master gardener is about. There's a great deal of lifelong learning. I also think it is important to me to plant plants that nourish our wildlife. And there are so many ways to look at perennial gardens as doing that very thing. Coneflowers, for example, have beautiful, beautiful blooms. And then as the blooms fall off, you're left with this seed head that's very pronounced. And it also has a hollow stem. So if you leave them alone and don't prune off all of the basic dried up seed heads, then they're great food for all the little finches. The hollow stems of many perennials provide little nesting sites for smaller insects that get them through the winter and make sure that they can survive. And all of these plants help to create habitat for our birds and the pollinators, but birds in particular need many different types of habitat in a yard. They need ground cover, which many perennials will provide. They need an understory habitat as well, which is that medium range, the more like 3 to 7 feet, where they can hide from predators and nest, of course, and provide and find food. So all of this combined creates a wonderful habitat for many different kinds of wildlife in your yard. I really love nectar plants. So do the hummingbirds. Very important. It's vital. As you know, right now, the hummingbirds are migrating. And by having nectar plants in the yard, I have many different types of salvia, even shrimp plants, which we'll talk about in a minute. They provide so much food for the hummingbirds. So sometimes I don't even worry if I can't get the feeder out in time, because there's just so much back there for them to feed on. And they're doing it, and they're chasing me away from some of my own plants because, that's theirs, and that's fair. They are theirs right now. Also, don't forget, again, many of these native perennials do provide host value. When I say host value, that means it's a specialty plant that a certain type of for example, a certain type of butterfly needs to lay their eggs on that plant so that their caterpillars can hatch and feed on that plant. And it's only that plant that may provide that value. So that's what a host plant means. Site selection when it comes to choosing your perennials is very, very important, because there is a perennial to thrive in virtually every type of situation. So whether it is sun, shade, part sun, wet, dry, many actually thrive in very poor soil, which can be a gift to the gardener with a minimal amount of time. So all of these things are important when you think about where you're going to plant these plants. And that is because they tend to stay in their place for quite some time. You're planting a woody perennial that may be there for 8-10 years, perhaps longer. So think about that and try to choose the most optimum spot based on all the research that you have for that specific plant. Read the labels carefully, because there is excellent information on that label, and that will really help you choose just the right spot. Also remember, when we say full sun, or the label, I should say, says full sun, that rarely means full Texas sun, because our heat is extremely intense. Most plants that say full sun will be so much happier if they get morning, early afternoon sun, and then some late afternoon shade. It's not true of all, but in general, that's something to keep in mind when you're choosing your perennials. And also consider the hardiness zone. This has shifted as some of our average temperatures have shifted warmer This was revised in 2023 from, I believe the previous version was 2012. And our growing zones with average warmer temperatures have been shifting north. So, for example, it's really interesting to me that the dividing line between 9A and 9B kind of cuts across where I live. I live in Cyprus, and the 77433 zip code is 9B, and the 77429 is primarily 9A. So it's a kind of a fine line there, almost along 290. And yet the city of Tomball is, let's see, how does that work? The city of Tomball, I believe, is 9B, and all around it is 9A. So there's something that is slightly warmer on average in Tomball. It's really interesting to dig in. If you go to this site, you can type in your location and it will provide you with all the information that you need on your particular hardiness zone. Choosing plants for our garden, whether they are annuals or perennials, is it's a constant source of fun. There are many of us that love to buy a plant and then get it home and try to figure out where it's going to go. I know a lot of you are identifying with that right now, so I'm with you. However, planning can really prevent a lot of kind of discord in the garden. I would say always choose plants that you appreciate. If you see it, you think it's just beautiful, that's great. Also try to figure out if it will actually survive in your garden. I think this is important. So choose them for their beauty and their function and what they need to survive. It's always right plant, right place. I think that originated from an English gardener named Beth Chatto, who was known for doing that very thing. And if you can find the right choices for the sites that you have available in your yard, then that can make all the difference in your success. I should say at this point, though, don't be afraid to move a perennial. While they are going to be a plant that will perform in a place for a long time, if you made a mistake, I have done this so many times I can't tell you, then don't be afraid to move it in the dormant season. I've got one right now that I'm getting ready to, I've started kind of pruning it back a little bit, and I just have to move it because it's too large for that specific location. It's not quite the look I want. So don't be afraid to do that as well. But think about the time that you have to maintain your garden. We've already said these plants are very helpful because they can kind of do their own thing and not require you to have intense maintenance. That doesn't mean no maintenance, but lower maintenance. And also think about the criteria that you have. Do you want a certain color? Do you want a certain pattern or look? Many of the smaller perennials can be placed in clumps. Usually 3 to 5, an odd number is preferable for kind of increased visual appeal. And all of these things are important in how you choose plants. So in this particular presentation, I have included plants that I have personal experience with. Some are natives, some are Texas superstars. And I think in general, the criteria for me has been plants that I've just found to have real value over the years in terms of definitely ease of care. I have some out there that I literally have done nothing with since early spring, except maybe a mild haircut here and there. I want the plants in my yard to have some wildlife merit. So whether that is, again, like I said, being a nectar source, a host plant, all those things to me are important. And then I do kind of want them to look good, not great, because I am not a landscape designer. I'll tell you that up front. But I do enjoy beautiful plants with interesting blooms and color patterns. And, you know, it's something I'm constantly working on. I always want to make a change here and there. That's just part of gardening. So we will have some Texas superstars. I tried to label the ones that I know are Texas superstars, cross-referenced and checked. But what is a Texas superstar? So that is a plant that is tested throughout our great state. As you all know, it's 800 plus miles from El Paso to the border between Texas and Louisiana. pretty tall as well. And within the state of Texas, there are so many ecoregions that cover, I mean, virtually any type of growing condition that you can imagine. So a Texas superstar does well throughout the state. They're usually tested in some real landscapes, home gardens, things like that. And there is a selection that's made by a board of premier horticulturists from around the state, various locations. They get together, they look at the plants that have been trialed, and they make their decisions. And through all this rigorous testing, some plants make it to the Texas Superstar label. So we have some of those in this program. And then we'll also talk a little bit about earth kind growing and what that means. It's basically growing for low maintenance conditions. So that is, to fit in this category, you need a plant that is very resource efficient, requires minimal water, really doesn't care about fertilizer use, and will endure our freezes and our droughts and our heat. So these are tough things, not to mention, you just talk about all these environmental conditions. Well, that's one thing, but pests and diseases are another. And I think you all know that living in a hot, humid climate, we have our share of pests and diseases, whether it's leaf-footed bugs or, the latest in some kind of fungal disease that's put spots all over your plant, or plant rust. It goes on and on and on. So we have them here. And these plants tend to survive. They're resilient. They can help your workload. And a few of the plants we'll talk about are like lantana, different types of salvia, Turk's cap, rudbeckia, and more. And as I said, you can also visit the Earthkind site to learn more about Earthkind gardening. And I think we'll stop right here and see if there are any questions in the queue.
Yes, we got a few questions. Starting off, I'm going to get selfish and ask a question because you just mentioned salvia. I've got a Mexican sage that I planted last year in a large container, and it's done great in the backyard. It looks, it's gotten bigger, but I know that now as I'm looking at it, I'm like, it needs to go in the ground. It needs, and I've got a space for it right in the front. When is the best time to replant that? Especially coming from a container that's going to go, and it's going to go into the ground.
Yeah, and all of that's true. It's a wonderful plant, by the way.
Oh, it's beautiful. It was great.
Oh, they're just stunning. I think they're really gorgeous, and so do the pollinators. The best time, because it's in a container, you could plant it now, and it would be fine. But I would still personally wait till it's cooler. I would wait till October probably to go ahead and get that in the ground. And keep in mind, because it's the Mexican sage, you do want to cover it to a certain degree with a good layer of mulch when winter comes around, because it tends to perennialize. It's known as a perennial, and yet it's a little bit tender. Okay. So you do want to try to give it some cold protection if possible. Your other alternative is to keep it in the container, protect it if we have a really cold snap, and then put it out in the spring. But I think you'll be fine either way.
Okay, so October, and then it'll die back. Obviously, it's going to. I'm going to plant it, and it's going to look like it's going to look like it didn't do well for a little bit, I guess.
They have a way of doing that. You plant them, and then what is it? Sleep, creep, and leap. Yes, that's it. So perennials are known for that. The first year they do kind of sleep. They're just hanging out. The second year, they do start to creep. The important thing is to get a good root ball.
Right.
Get the plant as robust as possible. The third year, they go nuts.
Got it. And actually, one of our questions we had come in was, what are some of you talk about all the great things about perennials. What are the difficulties? What are some of the downsides?
Mm-hmm. Well, to me, some of the downsides are just the random things that happen. So if we get a really severe prolonged freeze, we might lose plants. Yeah. We might lose plants that otherwise we wouldn't have in our, whatever a normal winter is. We have probably a few more frequent hard freezes than we used to, because we need a meteorological talk. on that issue. So that's something we have to cope with, and also the random pest or random disease issue. Those are the downsides, but to be honest, those are the downsides of gardening in general, because those can affect almost anything that we plant.
One thing you didn't, I mean, so what about when they get too big? I mean, sometimes it happens. I mean, it's I've seen some perennials, especially if you see them like in the middle of a, they use them as a the line some of the streets in our
Yeah.
neighborhood, and they get, I've seen them in the yards. They can kind of get a little unwieldy sometimes.
They can get real sloppy and leggy, and so I think one of the things I know it in my head. I've not practiced it as well as I should, but I am better. I did better this year. First off, if they die all the way back, you're kind of starting from scratch. But when they get to that leggy-ish stage, which usually starts to happen about the end of May or June, that's the time to give them a good haircut. Not a real chop, but about a third, to
Okay.
take back about a third. In England, they call it the Chelsea chop, because there's this big Chelsea flower show that happens in May. And that's when they also say, now's the time to cut your perennials back. Well, it kind of works here too. But if you cut too much and it's too hot, then the plant can suffer.
Right.
So I would say keep it to about a third. And then you can do the same thing at the end of the summer to keep it looking better. And the benefit of that, not only is the plant more shapely and more robust, but it blooms more.
That's what we all want. All right. Well, let me let you get back into it. We're looking more about earth kind.
Yeah, earth kind gardening is great, and this is a wonderful resource with many great tips on lower maintenance gardening that still looks good. So the first plant we're going to talk about today, maybe some of you will roll your eyes and go, daylilies. So I am including daylilies because there's a daylily that can fit virtually every part of your garden, and there's almost nothing you can plant that is more reliable than a daylily. So there are literally thousands of varieties available. It's reliable for late spring and summer blooming. And if they're planted in a large group, they have a great deal of impact. Also, you can choose daylilies not just for color, but also for their height. So there are some that are very short, about a foot tall, others up to 3 foot and even a little bit more. The foliage that you cope with when there is no bloom on there is generally green through the year. It'll start to die back towards the end of the summer. And pollinators really love daylilies, especially the moths. They're a wonderful nectar source for pollinators. They're easy to propagate from division when they're dormant. So you can plant 1 or 2 varieties and then divide those if they're not patented. And you can have more and more, which is a great thing. I only included these next 2 slides just so you can see some of the variety, because they come in so many beautiful colors, from deep, rich burgundies to peaches and apricots and blends and stripes and every other thing. And this I include because, number one, you can see on the left what they can look like when they're planted in a large mass. And then on the right, because that is the daylily, the original native daylily, the hemerocallis that's growing in the wild on a slope in China. And that's what they look like. In the field, it's just a literal mass of that beautiful, beautiful, rich yellow color, almost gold. And it's just gorgeous. And this is actually the most propagated plant in the world, the original hemerocallis. It's all over the world now and bred to produce all kinds of beautiful blooms. So I included daylilies because I think they're often overlooked and underutilized, and they're just a great supplement to bring a pop of color to your garden and super reliable. So that's one. This next one is, well, I would say the Phlox paniculata, not water, is a wonderful plant. And this one in particular, the John Fanick phlox, was discovered by Greg Grant, who is one of our revered horticulturalists in the state. Greg has discovered many plants and contributed in so many ways to our knowledge of horticulture, both practices in the past and what we do now as well. This is a Texas superstar. And these photos are from my garden because this plant is actually blooming right now. It has spread in my garden on its own, which I love. Didn't have to make that happen. And has this beautiful clumping habit. It can take some shade, which is important. It will go dormant in the winter and has these really showy flowers. I think this is one of the most reliable and beautiful perennials that you can have in your yard. And if you want more of them through division or through actually allowing the plant to reseed, then you can have more. And it's a wonderful plant. I've also had another Phlox paniculata that is a solid purple, and that's been a great addition to my garden as well. Don't have that one right now, but I highly recommend that you take a look at Phlox, because you're going to get, with some of them, you get very early spring color. With this one in particular, it's much later in the year, and it comes at a time when I think the garden needs a little bit of a pick-me-up. So this John Fanick Phlox is a wonderful plant and a Texas superstar. And I also include Rudbeckia because when we think of it, we think maybe of like the Goldsturm's Rudbeckia hirta, which has a larger bloom, sometimes quite large. The stems are a little bristly, and there will be wonderful seed pods or cones left afterwards. So again, that's a food source. The one on the bottom is a little bit different look. This is the Rudbeckia triloba, which is a native. And actually, these are both natives. This is a multi-branched perennial, so it has a different look altogether. The flowers are only about 2 inches across. Pollinators love them. And I should say, in general, pollinators tend to love flowers that have an open habit. So you can see these are single petals with all the nectar right in the middle. It's easy for them to get to and feed. And I love the triloba because it blooms nonstop from June to November. It is very tolerant of pretty much any growing condition that you have. And it's just a great plant to bring that kind of pop of color later in the year. And we can't do this without talking about Echinacea, which is a wonderful plant with a great history. There's a lot of medicinal study that has been done with this particular plant. We're not going to talk about that today, but if you are interested, it's certainly something to look into. But these are just wonderful perennials. They're gorgeous. What I love about this picture that I took earlier in the spring is that these are two different forms of the Echinacea. You can see the one in the front is the one I think of as the most classic, and yet it's morphed a little bit in the back just through reseeding. And that one has a bit shorter petal and a little bit flatter profile. So it's not, that wasn't a different cultivar that I planted. That is something that happened in the garden. So it's fascinating to watch. And you can also see the color range. The newer flowers are very rich in color, and they kind of fade, and they still look beautiful all together. So Echinacea can bloom from April to September. Again, it has that seed head that's important to wildlife. The finches love them. And it's very tolerant of all kinds of growing conditions. Coreopsis is a beautiful perennial. There are many cultivars. That's why I just put Coreopsis species, basically. They vary in height. There are some that are more the ones that we might see, actually, our Texas native Coreopsis that we can see out in the fields. Those can get very tall, as much as 3 feet, perhaps more. That would be like the Coreopsis tinctoria is one of those, for example. That's a native Texas Coreopsis. These two in the photos are cultivars. They still offer tremendous wildlife value, but they have a different look. I love the two-tone one on the right as well. And I actually love the form of the one on the left. This is a Coreopsis I've had growing probably 5 years. And I love it because if you look closely, you can see that those petals are open petals, which I think are just beautiful. So the form of the flowers can vary tremendously. Coreopsis is easy to propagate, usually from division, but often from seed. And it is also another clumping perennial that's a real pollinator magnet. So we always love that. And this is a wonderful Texas native. This is the scarlet sage. It has many names: autumn sage, Texas sage, red sage, but it's Salvia coccinea. That is the particular plant that we're talking about. And it's one of the kind of the woody herbaceous perennials. So you'll see this plant usually lose all of its leaves, perhaps die back quite a bit in the winter, but just pop out again in the spring. It's very, very hardy and very drought tolerant, somewhat deer resistant. I sympathize with all of you that have to grow when you have deer around, because I know that's a big, big challenge. But this is a plant they're not particularly attracted to. We know that deer will eat almost anything, which is why we don't say deer proof, we say deer resistant. But it's a wonderful nectar source for hummingbirds and other pollinators, and very easily grown from seeds or cuttings. So highly recommend if you need a woody herbaceous perennial. If you want some red color, if you want to attract hummingbirds, this is a good plant choice. And lantana I included simply because it is so robust. When we talk about that full Texas sun issue, this one can take full Texas sun, and especially once it's really well established. The native form is Lantana urticoides, which is a bit of the kind of yellow, orange, red pattern on the right. And then the left is probably the classic new gold lantana. The invasive kind, Lantana camara probably is how it's pronounced, is the one that you see growing wild, maybe along fence lines and in fields, because it's the birds spread the seeds, and that's how it propagates itself. But the bloom is a bit like lavender and yellow, and it's a bit tall and rangy. It's a pretty flower, but it can be invasive. So in general, I do recommend the native Texas lantana. I think it's a great plant, and it can take many harsh growing conditions. I also wanted to include the fall aster because it's about time for the fall aster to shine. And this is it's an absolutely gorgeous plant. When it's in bloom, it's just solid purple, covered with bees, and a fabulous addition to anyone's garden. I like it as a border plant where it can kind of spill over the rocks on the border, and it's just gorgeous. So right now it's starting to get full of buds, and it should be blooming probably just in a few weeks. If you allow it to, it can spread and get very, very wide. I haven't seen it get quite as tall as maybe 4 feet. Mine tends to be around 2 to 3 feet, but it's a fabulous plant and highly recommended. And also Mexican mint marigold. If you're looking for a plant that's a substitute for tarragon when you're cooking, this is a robust perennial that will do just that, because tarragon doesn't grow that well here, but this one does. And it's a clumping, basically a perennial herb. It has these gorgeous yellow blooms. Again, it's just about time for this one to start blooming, which it will do until frost. It likes well-draining soil, not full sun. Afternoon sun shade is best. And it's just, again, a wonderful plant. Mine tends to propagate itself quite often just through layering. The stem will layer itself by laying on the ground and literally starting new roots, so you can disattach that from the mother plant and have a new one. I love this plant. This is a native. It's called the obedient plant. So it is just that. You can bend the blooms and they will kind of stay in their position, which is kind of a fun thing for kids too. But this plant is a pollinator magnet, as usual. I love the flower spikes. So, you've seen already different bloom shapes and how they can impact pollinators and make nectar available to them. These have almost the look of a foxglove with that bloom spike. Also a penstemon looks a little bit like that. Tubular flowers on this tall spike that keep kind of opening as the plant matures. And they are that gorgeous kind of lavender and pink, little touches of white in there. It can reach about 2 to 3 feet. We have a good stand of these at the Genoa Friendship Garden down in South Houston. And so if you're interested in seeing the plant kind of in its natural habitat, that would be a good place to do that. And I should have said this earlier. I think it's important when you are choosing these plants to try to see them in location. So there are many. We have the Houston Botanic Garden to visit. We have Herman Park that has gorgeous plantings there. Mercer Botanic Garden is another place that you might be able to visit and see some of these. And then many nurseries have these gorgeous landscape plantings as well that include many perennials. So that can help you choose the plants that you want for your yard. Gaur is a wonderful plant too. I love, this is a completely different look. It's very open and airy. This plant was discovered by the father of Texas botany, Ferdinand Jacob Lindheimer, and it is a worthy plant to bear his name. There are others that do as well, but it blooms literally from April to October. You can cut it back in the summer to kind of increase fall bloom. It needs a lot of room, and that's okay, but it's gorgeous when you plant a mass of it. It can take sun and some shade as well, kind of medium use of water. So this one does like consistently moist soil, doesn't like to dry out completely, but it's still relatively tolerant of most growing conditions and easy to propagate as well. We also included our native American beautyberry for many reasons. Number one, it's just gorgeous. It's really putting on a show right now because they are covered with berries. On the right, you can see a photo of the purple, which is the more common beautyberry that we have around. And then on the left is the white berry variety. So I have both in my yard, and I think they both provide a completely different look. But I love the way the branches just kind of arch over, and they're covered with fruit, and the birds love the fruit. And it's a wonderful understory shrub. So the berries are edible. There are some medicinal uses, I believe. So it's an interesting plant to have in your yard. It's often disregarded because it is a Texas native, and it grows, wild all over the place, but it makes a beautiful landscape plant. Turk's Cap is a wonderful addition. If you're looking for something that just will come back year after year after year, Turk's Cap is a plant for you. It can get enormous. As John alluded to earlier, some of the plants can get out of bounds. Turk's Cap can. Often, if I have the room, I just let it do its thing. But it's a wonderful plant, again, named by one of the original plant hunters. And this plant blooms literally from May, sometimes even a little earlier, all the way till first frost. There are blooms available in white, red, and pink. And I took the picture on the left because I have both, obviously the pink and the red, and the branches just happened to overlap. So I was able to capture the different colors there for you. But the fruit of Turk's Cap is edible as well. And again, the birds love it. So it's a great wildlife plant for your yard. This is the only grass I included. And I love muhly grass. I just think it's one of the most beautiful things when you see an entire field of it. And there are less fields of it, I should say. But when you see an entire field of it in October, it's just this beautiful kind of a pinky purple haze on the grass. And it's absolutely stunning. So there is the capillaris, which is the one on the right, on the left, which is the kind of the purple one. On the right is the Lindheimerii is the botanical name. That one is the white spiky one. And they're both very, very important for our ecosystem. Prairie grasses grow deep, deep roots, and they really help in terms of whether it's carbon capture or erosion control or water retention, so that these things help with flooding. They're wonderful plants. And if you have an area that could benefit from the look of a beautiful grass, highly recommend them. I put several justicias in this talk because they're just great plants. Now, we may look at this and go, oh, it's the shrimp plant. And they've been around for a while, yes, but they do have tremendous value in specific spots in your yard. Number one, they can take quite a bit of shade. So if you have an area that is just full of shade and you struggle with what to plant there, you might consider some of the justicias because they will provide blooms for hummingbirds and pollinators and still do well in a spot where other plants would struggle. They have beautiful pink blooms in some cases, kind of a pinky coral, but also yellow, and some are in variegated leaf form. So there's a lot of variety in this particular type of perennial. These tend to die back almost completely to the ground and return. And if they don't, they're also very, very easy to propagate. But mine tend to survive. They look so tender and fragile, and yet they're more robust than you might think. This is another type of justicia, which is called, common name is Mexican hummingbird bush. And this one is probably, I don't know, it may be a battle, but this is one of the toughest plants in my yard, no question. It made it through Uri with no cover at all, and has just been, it goes from strength to strength ever since, really. It looks fragile because the leaves are kind of delicate looking, but I do like the fact that they have a more light green appearance, and then the contrast between the really deep orange flower blooms and the foliage, I think, is quite beautiful. It's super easy to propagate from cuttings as well. But it will spread and form a very large shrub. So if you have an area that you want to be filled with a plant that looks like this, then I honestly just can't recommend it enough. It's robust, it's easy. It will take, we were talking about giving plants haircuts earlier. This one is one I do have to cut back, usually in May and again later in the summer, but again by no more than a third, just to kind of keep it within bounds, because there's kind of a paver wall under there, and it wants to just go everywhere. But it's a wonderful plant. And then I also love this form of justicia, which is Justicia carnea, and it's also called Jacobinia or bloom flower. These come in many colors. They're probably, of the justicias, one of the most delicate, but I have had them survive. Well, I had one that survived Uri, and I covered it with leaves, and then I put another cover on top of that just to protect it, and it survived just fine. They bloom in so many beautiful colors, pink, orange, white, etc. Right now I have a pink and an orange. And you can imagine just by looking at the shape of that flower that hummingbirds love it. And you'd be right, because it's full of nectar and easy for them to feed on. All these tubular flowers are obviously hummingbird magnets for the most part. Easy to grow, indirect sun. It does like a kind of a moist soil, and you'll see that because it will droop for you if it needs a little attention. It's also very easy to propagate. And there are a few plants in here that I think we think of as very routine. Oh, it's the Jacobinia. It's really spectacular. And when you have multiple blooms on this particular plant, it's covered with the flower spikes, it's just stunning. And salvias, honestly, we could do an entire program on salvias. There are so many different kinds. These are a couple. John had mentioned that he has the Mexican sage, which I think is Salvia leucantha. That's a gorgeous plant with kind of purple and a bit of white on the long, long bloom spikes. And plus the stems themselves on Salvia leucantha are so soft and they feel really neat. And it's just a great plant. These are a couple that I think are so robust. If you're interested in wildlife gardening, can't recommend them enough. Amistad is on the right, very deep, rich purple flowers. Black and blue is on the left. These are plants you can propagate. They're no longer on patent. They die usually back to the ground, but they return, and they can, if you let them, spread to be about 5 feet tall and 5 feet wide. So it's quite a lot of plant. Make sure that you give it plenty of room, but it's just a wonderful addition to your garden. I included Russellia because, again, hummingbird value, pollinator value, also because it's a completely different look. It has almost a ferny appearance, very delicate. And some people don't like that look because it looks a little bit kind of scrubby. It's hard to shape this plant. It wants to make its own shape, and that's okay for various spots, but it will die back again completely to the ground and return. And if you let all the flower spikes grow, it can get 4 feet and taller. But you can see there's kind of a pendulous shape to the blooms, the way they hang down. A vivid orange can take some shade as well. but it's a wonderful addition for a specific look for your yard. This is a plant I think is very underutilized, and many people don't know about it. This particular type of verbena is Verbena bonariensis, and I first ran across it, I think I was overseas, and I thought, well, that's just really interesting, and found out that it does grow very well here. Ran across it in a specific garden center at one time, and I planted it once, and I've had it for probably 12 years in some form because it's very kind and it will just reseed. So the plant itself may survive the winter and grow from the base. It may just go ahead and perennialize in your yard, but if it doesn't, for whatever reason, then there are usually enough seeds that propagate that you can kind of transplant the volunteers and have some more. But it's real open, it's very airy, it's a wonderful nectar source, and if you can plant it like kind of at the back or along the fence, it's a lovely accent with a completely different look. There are cultivars that are smaller. The Verbena bonariensis in general can get very, very tall, but it never looks clumpy. It's very open, and the smaller ones can be more about 2 to 2.5 feet. There's one called Vanity that is often sold around here. This is the last plant, I believe, that we're going to talk about, and this is just one of my favorites. I think it's a stunning perennial. A common name is called lion's mane. It is a Leonotus leonurus is the actual plant itself. That's the botanical name. It's a native of South Africa, tends to be a woody perennial, and will again die back completely in the winter. But look at these blooms. Aren't they gorgeous? And this is the time when this plant starts to come into its own. It's just now beginning to bloom. I always think it's fascinating that so many of the fall plants have these wonderful fall colors. So it's like, you don't have to work at it. They do it for you. But it's a spectacular plant, the way that it does have this gorgeous bloom form. It's got a whorled look. There's a set of bloom. There's a little more stem, another set of bloom. It's lovely. And it is a good nectar source as well, and propagate usually from stem cuttings. So it can get quite tall. Mine's spread considerably, but it's lovely and robust, requires zero care. I've done nothing to it, and it just keeps going. So it's a great plant for your yard. And if you're interested in finding out more about various perennials, this particular resource, Gardening with Perennials in Harris County, is available if you want to take a snap of the QR code. Also, I'm sure the link is in the chat as well. We've got a great team working behind the scenes to provide answers to your questions and resource links. And this is one that I think is just important because it goes through a list of perennials that do well here, and it explains their color pattern, their growth habits, how they're propagated, and much more. So it's a great resource as well. And if you're interested, by the way, Harris County Master Gardeners have a couple of plant sales coming up. Both of these are going to be online only sales. So there will be a link coming up when the actual storefront opens, and the days that you see on the screen are going to be the pickup days for the plants that you would have bought online. So just a heads up on that. One of them is native plants only, and the other one is perennials and fall vegetables and lots of other stuff. And I think always we want to close and thank you for your support and your interest in all these wonderful things that we love to talk about. And I guess with that, we'll see if there are any more questions.
We absolutely do have some questions. I'm going to go ahead and move back the slide just here because I don't want people to miss that. I want to ask you about that too in a minute. That sounds really cool. An online plant sale. Okay. Different questions coming in. Let me see if you've answered some of these, but just to confirm. So the best time to plant perennials is
fall.
Right now. Now's the perfect time to be going to these fall plant sales. And
Yeah.
Now, what about from seed? If you're going to be doing it from seed, is like how that would be
Hmm.
Too late to get the seeds in? You want to get the seeds in earlier?
Actually, no. And I'll give you just a couple of examples from nature. The rudbeckia and the coneflower that are out in the yard right now, some of them are already at that point where their seed heads are drying up and starting to fall off. And that's the way nature plants a lot of those native plants. The seeds will dry up, they'll fall off, hit the ground in the fall, and that's when they start to, some of them will germinate, but some of them will just be dormant until all the conditions are right, whether it's moisture and soil temperature and ambient temperature and all sunlight, all those things combine, and they'll germinate early in the spring. So it depends on the plant as to when you would want to go ahead and propagate by seed. And I should say, by the way, you asked about when to plant them. We do think of the fall as being perfect because they can form a good strong root system through the winter, because we have typically mild winters.
Right.
So the plant will continue to grow, just not as much, in terms of like from the ground up. But early spring is also fine.
Okay. Well, let's hope for the typical weather of Houston.
Whatever that is anymore.
Whatever that is. Here's another question from online. I recently saw a Mexican Turk's cap for sale at a nursery. Do you know the difference?
No, I don't. And it would all depend on the exact name of that plant that she saw, because sometimes that's the reason why we like to use the botanical name sometimes, because a plant can have 4 or 5 or more common names for the same plant. So, I mean, it could well be, unless I saw it,
Right.
that was just the Turk's cap that we were talking about here. But it could be a different one. So no, I don't, but that's something we can research.
Good to know. Good to know. Also, had a question about hummingbirds. Now, I know you mentioned a lot of different plants that are great for attracting hummingbirds.
Mhm.
Is there a rule of thumb if you're looking at the flowers on like what type of flowers might, like the structure of the flower that, attract more hummingbirds?
Yes, there is. Although some of them would surprise you by the things they feed on. But in general, those tubular flowers are the shape that they're more attracted to. They also love purple and blue flowers. And it's kind of ironic because we always think of red, like everything has to be red for a hummingbird. But they love the purples and the blues. And that even that Verbena bonariensis, that very tall, open with the small blooms, they feed on that all the time as well. So they can surprise you, but in general, it's just the shape of the way they have to feed, because they
Right.
have a long tongue. So they just get more nectar from tubular flowers.
I think it makes it easier on them. So great. And speaking of eating for the eating, you mentioned that beautyberry is edible, and I've I've never I for some reason thought that it wasn't edible, but it is. You're saying, and what does it taste like? I mean, is it?
Yeah, I probably should have gone foraging in the yard before I answered that question. It is edible. Many people use it more to make jelly than
Okay.
anything. It's kind of like making jelly out of Mustang grapes here. Oops, sorry about that.
No, no. It's actually, let's leave it there. We can move ahead. We'll
Yeah.
come back to the gallon. So people.
Yeah. So I know that's a common thing as well. And I have not. And then the reason I haven't, I suppose it sounds wimpy, but I do like to leave all the berries for the birds.
Oh well, I am far less. I'm way more selfish. If I grow a fruit, dang it, I'm eating it.
Exactly. Well,
But one thing we might not want now, firecracker plant.
yeah.
Are they dangerous to dogs or pets? I've heard that if like sometimes dogs can eat those.
The Rucellia.
Yes.
I think we want to give a really accurate answer to that question. So I would feel better if we researched it
Okay.
first.
Okay. Well, just
I
something to think about to look at it. Because I remember, and that might be a different. I might be thinking of a different plant, but I wanted to say it was firecracker
Mhm.
plant when I thought of that.
Yeah.
Okay.
There are some resources online that you can find. I think even the Poison Control Center may have a list, but because they vary so much in terms of
Right.
toxicity, so one plant could literally be lethal and another one is just going to cause some GI upset, and we wouldn't want to give any wrong information on that. If anyone in the chat can do a quick search or research that, that would be great.
Let's see. Well, yeah. And in the meantime, while they're looking up that, I just want to go back here and talk. So I've bought plants online. Usually, I bought trees online and had them shipped in for something exotic when I'm getting want to try some. But I've never done a native plant sale online. Is this new? How does this work?
It's really just that it's an online storefront.
Okay.
So, when you pop a specific plant into the queue there, you'll see the plant, hopefully a picture of it as well, and a general description.
Okay.
And so that lets you go ahead and add it to your cart if you choose, or different, it's loaded based on the quantity that are available. So if we have 15 of a certain plant, then, it will sell down, and it would show as sold out if they're no longer available. But it's easy. You order, pay, and then you just show up that day to pick up your plants.
Yeah, I love that. You don't have to wait in the mail. You get to go pick it up, so it never gets packed up or anything like that. And I know that you guys, because it's you're the master gardeners, I always know that it's the plants are in tip-top shape and exactly what you're getting, what you're paying for, and it's well, some of the other places you can buy plants around here, you're not always not always sure what you're getting.
Yeah, well, thank you. Yeah, of course we're all learning all the time. That's for sure.
All right, and then of course I want to remind everybody we've got another show coming up next month. That'll be the last show of our season. That's going to be composting, October 21st. Something you're going to definitely want to get into, and there's been a lot of questions about that already. Valerie, thank you so much. We haven't got the question answered yet on the firecracker plants, but you know what? Make sure you look it up, check it out before you plant those in your yards. As with anything, you should always be doing a little research. And one place you can always get your questions answered is the Harris County Master Gardeners. Just go to their website, and they have a place for questions. And believe me, I've done this. They will give you detailed answers all about native plants, and I appreciate it. So that's a good place to go for those answers. Valerie, thank you so much once again for being with us. I hope you're going to be on the schedule for next year with some presentations.
That's the plan. I think we're talking about gardening myths.
Okay. Well, we look forward to seeing you. And until then, everybody, thank you so much for joining us. All right.
Thanks, everyone.